I was sitting in my car at a rest stop off Route 9 when I noticed the man standing under the broken light. The rain was coming down hard enough that my wipers were on full speed, and even then I could barely see past the hood. I had pulled off because the visibility was getting dangerous, and I figured 20 minutes of waiting wouldn't hurt. There were only 3 other cars in the lot, all parked near the building, and mine was the furthest out. The man was maybe 40 feet away, just standing there in the rain. He wasn't moving toward the building or back to a car. He was just standing. I could see him clearly when the other working lights swung in the wind, casting shadows across the wet pavement. I looked down at my phone to check the weather radar, and when I looked back up, he was closer. Not by much, maybe 10 feet, but he was definitely closer. He was still just standing there, hands at his sides, face pointed in my direction. The rain was soaking him completely. I could see his clothes were dark and stuck to him. I told myself he was probably just confused or drunk, maybe waiting for a ride. But something about the way he stood there, not moving, not even seeming to react to the rain, made me uncomfortable. I started my car. The engine turning over seemed loud even with the rain hammering on the roof. I turned on my headlights and they lit him up fully. He didn't react to the light at all. He just stood there staring. At least I think he was staring. The distance and rain made it hard to see his face clearly. I put the car in reverse and started backing up slowly, keeping my eyes on him. He didn't move. I got about halfway back to the rest stop building when I stopped to shift into drive, and that's when I saw him in my rearview mirror. He was behind my car now. Not right behind it, but maybe 15 feet back, standing in the same position. I hadn't seen him move. I had been watching my mirrors the whole time I was reversing, and I hadn't seen him walk around or run. He was just there. My heart was pounding now, and I felt this cold feeling in my stomach. I drove forward quickly, heading toward the other parked cars near the building. When I got there, I parked under one of the lights and looked back toward where I had been. He was gone. The empty parking spot where my car had been was just empty wet pavement under the broken light. I sat there for a while, telling myself I had just lost track of him in the rain and darkness. The rain was so heavy that visibility was terrible, and I had been moving and checking mirrors. It made sense that I could have missed him moving, but I kept thinking about how still he had been and how quickly he had appeared behind my car. I decided to wait until another person came out of the building before I went in to use the bathroom. I didn't want to walk across that parking lot alone. After about 10 minutes, a couple came out and got into one of the nearby cars. I took that opportunity to run inside. The rest stop was almost empty, just one employee behind the counter and an elderly man buying coffee. I used the bathroom quickly and bought a bottle of water I didn't want just to delay going back outside. When I came back out, the couple's car was gone and there were only 2 cars left besides mine. The rain had lessened slightly, but it was still heavy. I walked quickly to my car, got in and locked the doors immediately. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide if I should just start driving despite the weather, when I noticed something on my windshield. It was a smudge, like someone had pressed their hand against the glass, but it was on the outside, and it was positioned right in front of the driver's seat. The rain was washing it away slowly, but I could see the clear outline of fingers and a palm. My car had been parked under a light next to the building. Someone would have had to walk up to it, lean over, and press their hand against the windshield while I was inside. I looked around the parking lot, but I didn't see anyone. I started driving immediately, getting back on the highway despite the rain. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and I kept checking my mirrors obsessively. The drive home took almost 2 hours because of the weather, and I didn't see anything unusual the whole way. But I couldn't shake the image of that man standing in the rain, or the feeling that he had somehow moved around my car without me seeing. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before going inside. I told my wife about it, and she said I had probably just gotten disoriented by the rain and the stress of driving in bad weather. She was probably right. But then, 3 days later, I was putting something in my car, and I noticed a mark on the rear window. It was the same thing, a handprint, but this one was on the back window on the driver's side. It was faint, like it had been there for a while and had been rained on multiple times. The position of it bothered me more than anything. It was low, near the bottom of the window, like someone had been crouching or kneeling when they placed it there. I thought about where I had parked that night, and I realized that if someone had been crouching behind my car when I was reversing, I wouldn't have seen them in my mirrors. The angle would have been wrong. I would have backed up right toward them, and they could have reached up and touched the glass as I was stopping. I tried to remember if I had felt any bump or resistance when I was backing up, but I couldn't. The rain had been so loud, and I had been so focused on watching for the man in front of me. I washed both handprints off that day, using glass cleaner and scrubbing hard until there was no trace of them left. I haven't been back to that rest stop, and I don't plan to go back. I've driven past it twice since then, both times during the day, and both times I've made sure to look at the parking lot as I passed. The broken light is still broken. There's always a few cars parked near the building, but I've never seen anyone standing out in the lot away from their vehicle. My wife still thinks I just got spooked by bad weather and a confused person, and maybe she's right. But sometimes, when it rains hard at night, I think about that man standing perfectly still in the downpour, and I think about those handprints on my car. I think about how he would have had to touch my car twice, once while I was inside the rest stop, and once while I was reversing, and I wonder if there was a third time I didn't notice. I wonder if he touched it while I was sitting there at the beginning, before I even saw him, when my attention was on my phone, and the sound of the rain was covering everything else. The knocking started just after midnight, and it took me a minute to realize what I was hearing. I had been lying in bed, half asleep, listening to the rain hit the windows of my apartment. I live on the third floor of an old building downtown, and the sound of rain on the fire escape outside my bedroom usually helps me sleep. But then there was this other sound, a rhythmic tapping that didn't match the random pattern of the rain. It was coming from the window. I opened my eyes and lay there, trying to figure out what could be causing it. A branch, maybe, or something caught in the fire escape railing. But the tapping had a regular rhythm to it. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. It went on for about a minute before it stopped. I got up and went to the window, pulling back the curtain. The fire escape was empty, just wet metal grating and railings reflecting the streetlight below. The rain was steady but not heavy, and I could see down to the street clearly. There was no one out there, no trees near the building, nothing that could be blown against the window. I stood there for a few moments looking out, and then I went back to bed. I figured it was just the building settling or something related to the plumbing. Old buildings make strange noises, especially in the rain. I had almost fallen back asleep when the tapping started again. Same pattern, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. This time I counted. It happened 6 times before stopping. 18 taps total. I got up again, more annoyed than concerned, and went back to the window. I opened it this time, leaning out into the rain to look at the fire escape more carefully. The metal was wet and cold under my hands. I checked the railings, the platform, even reached out to feel the window frame itself to see if something was loose. Nothing. The fire escape was solid, and there was nothing on it that could be making that sound. I pulled my head back inside and was about to close the window when I noticed something on the platform below mine. It was hard to see in the dark and rain, but there was a shape there, something that didn't match the usual outline of the fire escape. I leaned out further, trying to get a better look. It looked like a person sitting on the platform with their back against the railing. They were completely still. I called down, asking if they were okay, if they needed help. No response. The rain was making noise, but not so much that they couldn't have heard me. I called again, louder this time. Nothing. I went back inside and grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight and pointing it down at the platform. The light caught them clearly. It was a man, wearing dark clothes, sitting with his legs stretched out in front of him and his head tilted back against the railing. His eyes were open, looking straight up at me. He didn't move or speak. He just sat there in the rain, staring up at the light from my phone. I felt my stomach drop. I asked again if he was okay, if he needed me to call someone. He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. The rain was running down his face, and he just sat there. I pulled back inside and immediately called the police. I told them there was someone on the fire escape outside my building, that they weren't responding, and I was worried they might be hurt or in some kind of medical crisis. The dispatcher asked if the person was moving or appeared to be breathing. I looked back out the window, shining my light down again. He was still in the same position, but I couldn't tell from that angle if he was breathing. I told the dispatcher I wasn't sure. She said they would send someone to check it out and to stay inside my apartment and keep my door locked. I stayed at the window watching him. He didn't move at all. The rain kept falling and he just sat there. After about 5 minutes, I heard the tapping again. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, but this time I could see it wasn't coming from him. He was still sitting motionless on the platform below. The tapping was coming from my window, from the outside. I spun around, pointing my light at my own window. There was nothing there, just rain running down the glass. But I had heard it clearly, and it had definitely come from my window, not from below. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, holding my phone, trying to make sense of what was happening. The man below still hadn't moved. The tapping didn't start again. I waited there, not sure what to do, until I heard sirens outside. I looked down at the street and saw a police car pull up. 2 officers got out and looked up at the building. I waved my light so they could see which window was mine, and one of them waved back. They went to the front entrance of the building. I went to my apartment door and waited. I could hear them coming up the stairs, talking to each other. When they knocked, I opened the door immediately. I explained the situation, pointing them toward my bedroom window and the fire escape. One officer went to look while the other stayed with me, asking questions about when I first noticed the person, if I had seen anyone enter the building or go onto the fire escape. I told him I had just heard the tapping and then saw the man when I looked out. The other officer came back from the bedroom. He said there was no one on the fire escape. I followed them back to the window, and they were right. The platform below mine was empty, just wet metal and shadows. I insisted I had seen someone sitting there less than 10 minutes ago. They asked if I had been drinking or if I had taken any medication that might affect my perception. I said no. They looked at each other in that way police do when they think they're dealing with a confused person or a false alarm. They did a quick check of the fire escape anyway, going down one level and looking around with their flashlights. They came back and said there was no sign anyone had been there, and the fire escape access points from inside the building were all locked and showed no signs of tampering. They suggested that maybe I had seen shadows from the streetlight, or that someone had been there but left when they heard sirens. They were polite but clearly ready to leave. I thanked them, and they went back downstairs. After they left, I stood at my window for a long time, looking down at that empty platform. The rain had picked up again, heavier now. I checked the window lock 3 times before I went back to bed. The tapping didn't start again that night, but 2 nights later, during another rainstorm, it came back. Same pattern. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I didn't get up to check the window. I just lay there in the dark, listening to it repeat 18 times before it stopped. I moved out of that apartment 5 weeks later. The GPS lost signal about 20 minutes into the drive, right when the rain started getting serious. I was trying to get to my sister's place upstate for her birthday, and I had left late because of work. The route took me through some rural areas I didn't know well, mostly 2-lane roads through farmland and small patches of forest. When the GPS went out, I was already committed to a road that didn't have any turnoffs visible in the rain. I figured I would just keep going straight until I hit a town or an intersection where I could pull over and get my bearings. The rain was coming down so hard that my headlights barely cut through it. I slowed down to about 30 miles an hour and turned my hazards on. After about 15 minutes of driving like that, I saw lights ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a car parked on the side of the road with its hazards on, just like mine. I slowed down even more as I passed it. It was a sedan, dark-colored, and I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. They didn't wave or signal for help, so I kept going. The road curved slightly, and when I checked my rearview mirror, I could still see their hazard lights blinking in the distance behind me. I drove for another few minutes, and then I saw more lights ahead. Another car parked on the side of the road, hazards on. This one was also a dark sedan, and as I passed it, I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. They didn't move or acknowledge me. I felt a strange twist in my stomach, but I told myself it made sense. Bad weather, people pulling over to wait it out. It wasn't that unusual. But then I saw a third car. Same situation, dark sedan, hazards blinking, person sitting inside. This one was maybe half a mile past the second one. I slowed down almost to a stop as I passed it, trying to see inside more clearly. The windows were fogged up, but I could make out a silhouette in the driver's seat. I considered stopping to ask if everyone was okay, if there was some kind of problem with the road ahead that I should know about. But something about the whole situation felt off. 3 cars, all the same type, all parked in the same way, all with someone just sitting inside. I sped up a little and kept going. I started counting in my head, trying to track how far I had gone and how long it had been since I lost the GPS signal. I needed to hit a town or an intersection soon. The road couldn't just go on forever like this. I saw the 4th car about 10 minutes later. Same as the others, dark sedan, hazards on, person inside. This time I didn't slow down. I just kept my speed steady and watched it disappear in my rearview mirror. My hands were tight on the wheel, and I realized I was holding my breath. I forced myself to breathe normally and think logically. Maybe there was a funeral or some kind of gathering, and these were people who had pulled over because of the weather. Maybe it was a coincidence. But the sameness of it all, the identical cars, the way each person just sat there without moving, it was getting to me. I turned my radio on, trying to find a local station that might have weather or traffic information. All I got was static and fragments of distant stations cutting in and out. I turned it off. The 5th car appeared about 5 minutes after the 4th. I almost didn't want to look as I passed it, but I did, same as all the others. I started thinking about turning around, trying to backtrack to the last intersection I remembered, but the road was too narrow and the visibility was too poor. I would have to find a wider spot or a driveway to turn around safely. I kept driving, watching for any break in the trees or any sign of a place to pull off. The rain was relentless, and I had to keep my wipers on the highest setting just to see a few feet ahead. I checked my phone again, but there was still no signal. The clock on my dashboard said I had been driving for almost an hour since the GPS went out. That seemed wrong. It felt like longer, but I couldn't be sure. Time does strange things when you're stressed and focused on the road. The 6th car was there about 8 minutes later. I didn't slow down this time. I just noted it as I passed, another dark sedan with hazards blinking and a silhouette inside. I was starting to feel genuinely afraid now, not just uncomfortable. The pattern was too consistent, too deliberate. I started thinking about what I would do if I saw a 7th car, or if the road just kept going with these parked cars appearing every few minutes. Would I eventually run out of gas? Would I have to stop and become one of them, sitting in my car with my hazards on while other drivers passed me in the rain? The thought made my chest tight. I pressed harder on the gas, pushing my speed up to 40 even though the visibility was terrible. I needed to get out of this area, to hit a town or a highway or something that felt normal. I didn't see a 7th car. Instead, the road suddenly opened up into an intersection with a traffic light. The light was green, and I could see a gas station on the corner, lit up and clearly open. I almost cried with relief. I pulled into the gas station and parked under the canopy, just sitting there for a moment with the engine running. The rain was still heavy, drumming on the metal roof above me. I checked my phone, and suddenly I had signal again. The GPS loaded and showed me exactly where I was, about 30 miles off my intended route, but on a road that would take me back to the highway. I went inside the gas station to use the bathroom and buy some coffee. The attendant was a young guy, maybe early 20s, and he looked half asleep. I asked him if the road I had just come from was always that empty. He looked confused and asked which road I meant. I described it, mentioning the cars I had seen pulled over. He said he didn't know that road, which seemed strange since the gas station was right at the intersection. I got back in my car and pulled up the GPS map, zooming out to see the full route I had taken. The road I had been on was marked, a thin gray line that curved through empty land before connecting to the intersection where I was now. I tried to scroll along it to see if there were any landmarks or names, but my phone suddenly froze. The screen went black and then it restarted on its own. When it came back on, I opened the GPS again, but this time when I zoomed out, that road wasn't there. The map showed the intersection and the main roads, but the route I had just driven wasn't marked anymore. I thought maybe I was looking at the wrong area, so I checked my location history. According to my phone, I had driven straight from my starting point to this gas station on the main road. There was no record of the detour or the narrow road through the empty land. I made it to my sister's place about 2 hours later, driving only on major highways and roads I could verify on the map. I didn't tell her about what happened because I didn't know how to explain it in a way that made sense. I still don't. I've tried to find that road again using satellite maps and online tools, but I can't locate it. I know generally where it should be based on where I started and where I ended up, but there's nothing there that matches what I drove through. Just farmland and a few small side roads that don't go anywhere significant. I've thought about going back to that area during the day to look for it, but I haven't done it yet. I'm not sure I want to find it, because if I do find it, I'll have to decide whether to drive down it again. And I don't know what I would do if I saw those cars again. All those dark sedans with their hazards blinking in the rain. All those people sitting inside, waiting. My neighbor knocked on my door around 11 at night, and when I opened it, she was standing there in her bathrobe, soaking wet. She said her ceiling was leaking, and water was coming through the light fixture in her bathroom. She asked if my apartment had the same problem. I told her I hadn't noticed anything, but I would check. She lived directly below me, so if water was coming through her ceiling, it was likely coming from my apartment. I went to my bathroom and turned on the light. Everything looked normal. No visible leaks, no water on the floor. I checked under the sink and around the toilet. Nothing. I told her I didn't see any problems, but I would keep an eye on it. She looked worried and said the water coming through her ceiling was clean, not rusty or dirty. So it had to be from a fresh water source, probably a pipe or the toilet line. I called the building manager and left a voicemail explaining the situation. It was late, and I didn't expect a call back until morning, but I figured it was important to document it. After my neighbor went back downstairs, I checked my bathroom again more carefully. I ran the water in the sink and the shower, watching for any leaks or drips. Everything seemed fine. I flushed the toilet and waited to see if any water appeared on the floor or around the base. Nothing. I even pulled up the bath mat and checked the tiles underneath. They were completely dry. I was about to give up and go to bed when I heard the sound. It was faint, like water running somewhere inside the walls. I put my ear against the wall next to the sink, and I could hear it more clearly. A steady trickling sound like a small stream flowing behind the drywall. I went to the kitchen and checked the walls there, listening carefully. I could hear the same sound, fainter but definitely present. I followed it through the apartment, putting my ear against different walls, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It seemed to be everywhere, a network of trickling sounds running through the entire structure of the building. I had never noticed it before, but now that I was listening for it, it was obvious. I went back to the bathroom and stood in the doorway, just listening. The sound was loudest there, concentrated in the wall behind the toilet and the sink. I thought about calling my neighbor back to ask if she could hear it too, but it was late, and I didn't want to worry her more. I decided I would mention it to the building manager in the morning. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard a different sound, a dripping noise, slow and rhythmic, coming from the bathroom. I got up and went to check, turning on the light. The sink faucet was off, the shower was off, but the dripping continued. I looked up at the ceiling. There was a small dark spot forming on the white paint directly above the toilet. As I watched, a drop of water formed and fell, hitting the toilet tank lid with a small tapping sound. Another drop formed and fell. I grabbed a towel and put it on top of the toilet tank to catch the drips. The dark spot on the ceiling was growing slowly, spreading out in a rough circle. I took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to the building manager's number along with a text explaining what was happening. The dripping got faster over the next hour. I moved the towel a few times as it got soaked, replacing it with another one. The dark spot on the ceiling was now about a foot in diameter, and the paint was starting to bubble. I put a bucket on the floor in case the ceiling gave way. Just after 1 in the morning, I heard my neighbor knocking on my door again. When I opened it, she looked panicked. She said the water coming through her ceiling had increased, and now it was coming from multiple places. Her bathroom was flooding, and she didn't know what to do. I told her about the spot on my ceiling and the dripping. We went back to my apartment, and she looked up at the bathroom ceiling. She said if water was coming through my ceiling, it had to be from the apartment above mine. The building was 4 stories, and I was on the 3rd floor, so there was one apartment above me. We went upstairs and knocked on the door of the apartment above mine. No answer. My neighbor knocked harder, calling out that there was an emergency and we needed to talk to them. Still no answer. I tried the doorknob, not really expecting it to turn, but it did. The door opened into a dark apartment. My neighbor hesitated, but I pushed the door open wider and called inside, asking if anyone was home. No response. I found the light switch and turned it on. The apartment was furnished and looked lived in, but there was no one there. We went to the bathroom and I could hear the trickling sound even louder here. The bathroom door was closed. I opened it and water came rushing out, spilling over my shoes and into the hallway. The bathroom was completely flooded, water covering the floor at least 3 inches deep. The sink was overflowing, the bathtub was full and spilling over, and the toilet was running continuously. I waded in and turned off the sink faucet and the bathtub faucet. I tried to stop the toilet from running, but the handle was broken and the water kept flowing. My neighbor was on her phone, calling the building manager's emergency line. I looked around the bathroom, trying to figure out how this had happened. All 3 fixtures had been left running, but the apartment had been locked from the inside. The doorknob had turned when I tried it, but there was a deadbolt that hadn't been engaged. Someone would have had to turn on all the water, leave the apartment, and lock the door behind them with just the handle lock, not the deadbolt. Or they were still in the apartment somewhere. That thought made me back out of the bathroom quickly. I told my neighbor we should leave and wait in the hallway. She agreed, and we went back out, leaving the apartment door open. The building manager arrived about 20 minutes later with a maintenance person. They went into the flooded apartment and shut off the water main for that unit. They asked if we had seen who lived there, and neither of us had. I had lived in the building for 8 months and had never seen anyone coming or going from that apartment. The building manager checked his records on his phone and said the apartment was currently vacant. It had been empty for 3 weeks since the previous tenant moved out. I told him that was impossible. The apartment was fully furnished and there were personal items visible in the living room. He went back inside and looked around, then came out looking confused. He said the apartment was supposed to be empty and locked, and he had no record of anyone having access to it. The furniture and belongings weren't supposed to be there. They ended up having to call the police because of the unauthorized access and the property damage. The police came and did a walkthrough of the apartment. They confirmed no one was inside and said it looked like someone had been staying there without permission. The building manager said he would have to review security footage and change the locks. My neighbor and I went back to our apartments. The dripping in my bathroom had stopped, but the dark spot on the ceiling was still there, and the paint was peeling. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that apartment upstairs, fully furnished and lived in, with water pouring from every fixture. I kept thinking about how I had never seen anyone coming or going, and how the door had been locked from the inside. In the morning, I asked the building manager if they had checked the security footage. He said the cameras in the hallway on the 4th floor had been offline for 2 days. They had no record of anyone entering or leaving that apartment. The furniture and personal items were removed later that week, and the apartment was cleaned and relocked. I still live here, but every time it rains, I listen to the walls. And I can still hear it, that trickling sound running somewhere behind the drywall.